It's hopeless. Those two words echoed through the grand halls of the Galactic Council, where the greatest minds of countless species had gathered to face their doom. They were losing. No, scratch that. They had already lost. The enemy, known only as the Vastcar, was a ruthless, unstoppable force. Their ships, black as void, sliced through the defenses of the Council's fleet like paper, their technology decades, if not centuries, ahead of anything in the known galaxy. Planets fell like dominoes, entire star systems surrendered, and the Vastcar marched forward, indifferent to the desperate pleas of the species they conquered. Councillor Zaltor, an 8-limbed, crystal-skinned Thrixian, stared at the hologram before him. It displayed the galaxy, his galaxy, fading under the creeping red of enemy advancement. He was one of the few who still remained optimistic, despite the crushing reality. A stubborn fool, the others called him, but his belief in a solution, no matter how ridiculous, kept him going. There had to be a way out of this mess. Councillor Zaltor, the voice of Councillor Verla, a thin, sharp-eyed Norithian, snapped him from his thoughts. Her usual calm demeanor was cracking under the weight of the impossible task before them. We've run out of options. Our defenses are shattered. Even the Titan-class warships from the Earthok homeworld fell in mere hours. Our advanced strategies have failed. Zaltor let the silence that followed grow heavy. He knew what Verla was thinking, what they were all thinking. They were about to suggest the one thing no counselor wanted to hear, the surrender. That may not be entirely true, a voice spoke from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. Everyone turned. No one had noticed the human before. He wasn't one of them, not really. He was more of an anomaly, a relic from a forgotten age. Few species even remembered that Earth had once existed. The human stood up slowly, his dark eyes surveying the room with a calculating expression. He was young, mid-30s by human standards, his hair unkempt and his clothing casual, almost lazy. He didn't belong here, not among the best strategists in the galaxy. But here he was. "Commander Raylan Drake," Verla said, her tone a mix of irritation and disbelief. "What makes you think you have anything to offer?" Raylan's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, I don't just think it. I know it. You've tried all your fancy tech, your hyper-advanced warships, your quantum calculations, and it's gotten you nowhere. You're fighting this war wrong." The silence that followed was deafening. The audacity of a mere human to criticize the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. It was almost amusing. "Humans are primitive," Zaltor muttered, though not unkindly. "Our calculations show that your species barely survived your own planet's demise. What could you possibly know that we don't?" Raylan's eyes flashed. "The Vastcar aren't winning because they have better tech or stronger ships. They're winning because they understand something you don't. Chaos. Unpredictability. You're all too focused on your perfect systems, your pristine strategies, but war isn't clean, it's messy, and that's why you need me." He crossed the room slowly, as if daring someone to stop him. "I've been watching the way they fight, and I know exactly how to beat them." The councillors stared in stunned silence, as if trying to process the absurdity of Raylan's words. Most of them had never even considered a human strategist. Sure, humans were known for their adaptability, their unpredictability in small skirmishes, but this was a galactic-scale war, and here was Raylan Drake, proposing he could win it with, what, chaos? "You're suggesting we abandon everything we've built?" Verla asked, her voice sharp, the disbelief evident. "Our formations, our calculations, your predictability," Raylan cut in. "That's exactly what the Vastcar are counting on. You've built your entire strategy on logic and mathematics, but war isn't logical, Counselor. It's instinct. It's gut. The enemy knows every move you're going to make before you even make it because you think too perfectly. They don't play by your rules." Verla's thin lips pressed into a line. Zaltor, meanwhile, watched with a growing interest. Could it be? Could this human actually be onto something? "And what do you suggest?" Zaltor asked carefully. "That we just start improvising?" Raylan chuckled, shaking his head. Not quite. Improvisation without a plan is just chaos. But controlled chaos, that's where we shine. He flicked a switch on the console before him, and a new hologram appeared. A galactic map, but this time red lines cut across the known boundaries. Unconventional attack routes, unexpected maneuvers, erratic formations. It was nothing like the Council's traditional strategic plans. "You've been too reactive," Raylan continued, "always playing defense. You wait for the Vastcar to make a move and then you counter. But what if you turned the tables? What if you didn't give them time to adapt? Hit them where they least expect it, where no one would expect it." "That's suicide," Verla hissed. "You're proposing we attack their strongholds directly. With what? We don't even have the fleet to sustain a counter-offensive." Raylan's smirk widened. "That's where you're wrong. You've been thinking too big. You don't need to match their firepower. You need to overwhelm them in ways they don't see coming. Guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run assaults, disrupt their supply lines, sabotage their communication systems, make them think you're everywhere at once." "But we're not," Zaltor pointed out, folding two of his arms across his chest. "We don't have the numbers." "You don't need numbers," Raylan said, his voice full of certainty. "You just need the element of surprise. And humans, we're good at surprises." For a moment the room was silent, the councillors weighing Raylan's words. It was reckless, it was risky, and yet there was a certain logic to it, a wild, unpredictable logic that defied everything they knew about war. "What do you propose, Commander?" Zaltor finally asked. Raylan's eyes gleamed. "I propose you let me lead a strike team, a small elite force. We'll hit the Vastcar where it hurts, disrupt their operations, and sow chaos behind their lines. They won't know what hit them." Verla shook her head. "And if it fails?" Raylan shrugged. "If it fails, we're no worse off than we are now, but if it works, we might just turn this war around." Zaltor leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. Could they really put the fate of the galaxy in the hands of a human? A species most councillors regarded as little more than a footnote in the grand history of the cosmos. But Zaltor wasn't like most councillors. He had seen humans fight before in smaller skirmishes during the early days of the war. They were relentless, unpredictable, and most importantly, survivors. If anyone could pull off the impossible, it would be a human like Raylan Drake. "Very well," Zaltor said at last, his voice steady. "You'll have your team, Commander. But be warned, this is your one and only chance. If you fail, the Council will not entertain any further human involvement in this war." Raylan nodded, unfazed. "I won't fail." The next few days were a blur of activity. Raylan handpicked his strike team, a ragtag group of specialists from various species, each chosen for their unique skills. There was Kexar, a hulking Brachis with unparalleled strength and combat prowess, Valira, a Venorian engineer who could hack into any system in the galaxy, and Sara, a stealthy villain who could move unseen in even the most heavily guarded enemy territory. Raylan's choice of team members raised a few eyebrows, but he was confident in his selections. They didn't need to be the best fighters in the galaxy, they just needed to be the best at what they did. The Council, skeptical but desperate, approved the mission. The Vastcar had no idea what was coming. Raylan's team moved quickly, infiltrating Vastcar space through a series of carefully calculated jumps that bypassed the enemy's sensors. They knew they couldn't afford to engage the Vastcar head-on, so they struck from the shadows, using hit-and-run tactics to sow confusion and disorder. Their first target was a Vastcar communications relay station deep within enemy territory. The station was heavily guarded, but Raylan had a plan. Valira hacked into the station's security systems, disabling the alarms and opening a path for Kexar and Sara to slip inside. Raylan led the assault, taking out the guards with precision and speed. Within minutes, they had planted explosives throughout the facility. As they made their escape, the station exploded in a fiery blast, cutting off the Vastcar's communication network across an entire sector. It was the first of many victories. Raylan's strategy of controlled chaos began to pay off. Each time the vast car tried to respond, Raylan and his team were already gone, striking at a new target. They sabotaged supply lines, crippled starports, and disabled key infrastructure, leaving the vast car scrambling to contain the damage. The enemy, once so confident in their superiority, found themselves on the defensive for the first time in the war. The balance of power was shifting. And the Council took notice. The rest of the galaxy watched in awe as the human-led strike team, against all odds, began to turn the tide of the war. The vast car were no longer invincible. They were vulnerable, and Raylan Drake was exploiting every weakness. But the war was far from over, and the vast car were not about to go down without a fight. Raylan knew that their victories had bought them time, but it wouldn't last forever. The vast car were adapting, learning from their mistakes. It was only a matter of time before they launched a counter-offensive. But Raylan had one last card to play. He gathered his team and outlined the plan. It was risky, perhaps their riskiest mission yet, but if it worked, it could end the war once and for all. Their target was the vast car's central command, deep within their home territory. If they could strike at the heart of the enemy's leadership, they could cripple their ability to fight. The mission was a gamble, but Raylan was no stranger to high-stakes situations. He had bet everything on this war, and he wasn't about to back down now. With their preparations complete, Raylan and his team set out for the vast car homeworld, knowing that this mission could be their last. But if they succeeded, it would also be their greatest victory. The journey to the vast car homeworld was fraught with peril. Raylan's team navigated through vast car territory with the utmost caution, knowing that any mistake could lead to their capture or death. The vast car fleet was on high alert, searching for the strike team that had wreaked havoc on their operations. But Raylan's unpredictable approach had worked to their advantage. Every time the vast car thought they had cornered them, they would slip away, leaving destruction in their wake. As they approached the vast car homeworld, the tension aboard their small stealth ship was palpable. This was it, the final mission, the one that would either win the war or doom them all. Raylan sat in the cockpit, his eyes scanning the star-filled void ahead. The vast car homeworld loomed in the distance, a massive, foreboding planet surrounded by orbital defenses that were nearly impenetrable. Nearly. "Everyone ready?" he asked, turning to his team. Kexar, the Braki's warrior, grunted in affirmation, ready to smash some skulls. Valira, the Venorian engineer, tapped her datapad. "We're good to go. I've already hacked into their orbital defense systems. We'll have a small window to slip through unnoticed, but it won't last long." Sarah, the fill-in infiltrator, flashed a confident smile. "Just get me inside, I'll handle the rest." Raylan nodded. He had chosen each member of his team for their unique skills, and they had proven themselves time and time again. But this mission would test them like never before. They approached the planet's atmosphere, their ship cloaked in the shadows of space. Valira's hacking skills had disabled the closest orbital defenses, but it wouldn't be long before the vast car realized something was wrong. They had to move fast. The ship descended through the atmosphere, breaking through the cloud cover and skimming just above the planet's surface. The vast car capital city stretched out before them, a sprawling metropolis of towering black spires, illuminated by the harsh red glow of their artificial suns. Raylan directed the ship toward the heart of the city, where the vast car's central command was located. This was the nerve center of their entire military operation, the place where all their strategies were devised and their forces coordinated. If they could take it out, the vast car's war machine would be thrown into chaos. "Landing in 3, Raylan said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Everyone stay sharp." The ship touched down in a secluded alleyway, hidden from the patrolling drones and soldiers. The team disembarked quickly, their movements silent and precise. "We've got limited time before they figure out we're here," Raylan said, checking his weapon. "Let's move." The streets of the vast car capital were eerily quiet, the oppressive architecture towering over them like sentinels. Raylan led the team through the shadows, avoiding patrols and surveillance systems, with Sarah's expert guidance. They moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each step bringing them closer to their target. As they approached the central command building, Valira's fingers flew over her datapad, disabling the security systems and opening a path inside. The building was a fortress, but Raylan's team had proven time and again that no fortress was impenetrable. "We're in," Valira whispered, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "But we've only got a few minutes before they notice the breach." "That's all we need," Raylan replied. "Let's finish this." The team slipped into the central command building, navigating the sleek high-tech corridors with practiced ease. They encountered minimal resistance at first. Most of the Vastcar forces were still focused on the outer defenses, unaware of the infiltration happening right under their noses. Raylan led the way, his mind racing through the plan. The objective was simple: get to the command center, plant the explosives, and get out. But simple didn't mean easy. As they reached the inner sanctum of the building, the Vastcar resistance began to stiffen. Armed guards patrolled the halls, and security drones zipped overhead. Raylan signaled for his team to move with caution, their weapons drawn and ready. Kexar, ever the brute force of the group, took point, barreling through the guards with sheer strength. Valira provided support, using her tech skills to disable security systems and lock doors behind them, preventing reinforcements from reaching their position. But it was Sarah who truly shone in the confined space. Her stealth and agility allowed her to slip past enemies unnoticed, taking them down silently and efficiently. The Vastcar guards didn't know what hit them. Finally, they reached the command center, a massive room filled with holographic displays, consoles, and Vastcar officers coordinating the war effort. Raylan's eyes narrowed as he spotted their leader, a tall, imposing Vastcar general standing at the central console. "Remember the plan," Raylan whispered to his team. "We take out the general, plant the charges, and get out before they even know we were here." The team moved into position, spreading out to cover all angles. Raylan approached the command center with deadly intent, his weapon trained on the general. But before he could take the shot, the general turned, his eyes locking onto Raylan with an unsettling calm. "You must be the human," the general said, his voice deep and resonant. "We've been expecting you." Raylan's blood ran cold. They had been discovered. But how? He glanced at his team, who were equally on edge, ready to spring into action. The Vastcar general's eyes gleamed with a mixture of amusement and contempt. "You think you're clever," the general continued, stepping away from the console and drawing a sleek alien weapon. "Disrupting our operations, sabotaging our forces. But you've underestimated us, human. We've been watching you, studying your tactics. And now, you've walked right into our trap." Raylan's mind raced. A trap? Had they miscalculated? No, it couldn't end like this. They were so close. The general raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Kexar roared and charged, knocking the weapon from the general's hands with a forceful blow. The room erupted into chaos as Raylan's team sprang into action, engaging the Vastcar officers in a brutal fight. Raylan ducked behind a console, returning fire at the enemy. They had to move fast. If they didn't plant the charges soon, the entire mission would be compromised. "Sarah, plant the explosives," Raylan shouted over the din of battle. "Valira, cover her." Sarah nodded and darted toward the command console, her movements swift and precise. Valira laid down covering fire, keeping the Vastcar soldiers at bay as Sarah began planting the charges. Meanwhile, Raylan and Kexar focused on the general, who was proving to be a formidable opponent. The general moved with the fluid grace of a trained warrior, countering Kexar's brute strength with calculated precision. But Raylan had faced worse. He knew how to fight smarter, not harder. As the battle raged on, Raylan saw an opening. The general had left himself exposed for just a moment, just long enough for Raylan to take the shot. With a sharp crack, Raylan's weapon fired, hitting the general square in the chest. The general staggered, his expression one of shock and disbelief as he crumpled to the floor. "Charges are set," Sarah called out. Raylan didn't hesitate. Fall back, we're getting out of here. The team made a swift retreat, dodging fire and evading enemy reinforcements as they raced through the corridors of the command building. Valira sealed doors behind them, slowing the Vastcar forces that were now in hot pursuit. They reached the exit just as the first explosion rocked the building. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and Raylan glanced back to see the command center consumed by flames. The Vastcar's central command was no more. Their mission was a success. The team boarded their ship, taking off just as more explosions ripped through the city. Raylan's heart pounded in his chest as they ascended into the sky, leaving the burning city behind. As they broke through the atmosphere and into the safety of space, Raylan allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had done it. They had crippled the Vastcar's war machine in one daring, impossible strike. But the war wasn't over yet. "We're not done," Raylan said, turning to his team. "The Vastcar will regroup, but without their leadership they'll be vulnerable. We need to press the advantage." Kexar grunted in agreement. "Just tell me who to hit next." Raylan smiled. "Oh, I've got a few ideas." Back on the Council's flagship, the news of Raylan's success spread like wildfire. The councillors, once skeptical of the human's abilities, now saw him as their best hope for victory. Raylan's unconventional tactics had not only turned the tide of the war, but had also inspired a new sense of hope among the galaxy's beleaguered forces. Zaltor, the once doubtful Thrixian councillor, watched the holographic display of the Vastcar's crumbling empire with a sense of awe. Raylan Drake had done the impossible, and he wasn't done yet. As the Council prepared for the final phase of the war, Raylan and his team stood ready. The Vastcar were weakened, but they were still dangerous. The galaxy's future hung in the balance, and it would be up to Raylan to finish what he had started. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. Humanity had proven itself not just a survivor, but a force to be reckoned with. And Raylan Drake, the war strategist nobody expected, was leading the charge.